Tonight's show is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon, Bendetti Optics, and you, our listeners. And side note, I still say to this day, everything any of us needs to know, we could learn from My Little Pony. What is up, all of you wayward souls, and welcome back to the Wayward Stories podcast. Wayward Stories is the podcast where we tell the tales of our adventures in our wanderings and our wonderings. Usually every 2 weeks, most of the time, but not so much in the last month. I'm sorry. What's up, guys? How's everybody doing? So sorry. How long's it been? 5 weeks since a drop? At least? Anyway, this is the part of the episode where I apologize for leaving you guys hanging for so long. In my defense, it's been a rough few weeks on a lot of levels for a lot of reasons. Not the least of which is my latest class. See, I'm a words guy, not a math guy. And to do anything sociologically related, you have to have at least a little math because of statistics. I think we've talked about statistics before. It's Satan's tongue written in Greek. It's insane. This class sucks, and it has taken up most of my personal time, and it's been a rough couple of weeks as far as that's concerned. School's gotten crazy. Work's been hectic. I've been doing some more stuff with my daughter, taking time to get out and go and do some things. And that's what tonight's episode is actually about. Tonight's episode is going to be called Seize the Moments. And we're going to talk about this for the entirety of the episode. But first, a little housekeeping. Please like, please rate, please review, please subscribe. And definitely the ratings and reviews. Most important probably, but also word of mouth. Share this with your friends. Share it in the groups. Guys, it's been working. We're getting more and more and more downloads, and it's going really well. I appreciate all of you who have had anything to do whatsoever with supporting the show. It means the world to me. So let's get on with tonight's show. I'm going to start out tonight by telling you guys about a new follower of the show. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our new friend because he's kind of the inspiration in a lot of ways for tonight's show. I've got several episodes floating around on the back burner. They're in my handy dandy notebook here. And they're all in their own right going to be good episodes when I feel inspired, when I'm not stressed out, and when I'm not doing everything possible to hang on to every last shred of my sanity and trying to pass this class. But I got a message from a gentleman named Hugo S. from Portugal. Y'all, Portugal. And it was a very, very kind message. And so Hugo and I have started interacting through Instagram Messenger. And I've learned a whole lot about Hugo. Hugo came to Wayward Stories for the search and rescue episodes. He is on a search and rescue team himself in Portugal. But he says, in his own words, he stuck around for the real stories, the stories of finding yourself, which is where this podcast started. For any of you who are new to the game, haven't listened to the back catalog, these last couple of years have been very much about just out there in the world and whatever adventures you can find in me, trying to encourage you to get off of your tails and get out and live your lives. But this show started very much about overcoming trauma. And Hugo shared some things with me about his own life, and he's got a very similar story to my own. And I'm not going to tell any of that. I'm not going to out you here, Hugo. First of all, thank you for all of your kind words. You have no idea how much I appreciate the connection. Secondly, thank you for your service and search and rescue over there in Portugal. I got to learn a lot about Portugal talking to Hugo, and that's super cool. But also, he inspired this episode because as I was milling about trying to survive my daily life, he comes at me talking about the older episodes of the show where I was sharing a lot about my personal trauma and the things I was trying to overcome and how it resonated with him, which number one was awesome because it means the show's landed with someone, which was the whole point of this show to start with, was to connect to people and help each other overcome our traumas, through telling our stories, right? Um, but he also talked about how he completely reprioritized his life, much like I did. He reached a point, not because of our show here. He already did this. This just resonates with him, but he tells me the story about how he reprioritized and he got out of a field that he did not care for, and he actually went after a dream that he's always wanted. And he started doing that, and he's reprioritized his life around his children and his family and getting out of this stupid grind, this day to day that the hierarchical stratigraphy, the people in power, want us to buy into so society continues to function and they can stay rich, right? He saw the same thing, like, no, we're ruining our lives by working our lives away for other people to get rich, and we're not happy, and we're not living lives for ourselves. Keeping in mind, I'm still working for other people to get rich, as is he. What this is about is just recognizing that bigger picture of life is happening all around us all the time. And the only way that you're ever going to enjoy it, the only way you're ever going to feel like you've done something, when you hit your deathbed and you think back and you're thinking, dang, I wish I'd spent more time at work. No, you're not. You're thinking, I wish I'd spent more time with my children. You're thinking, I wish I'd spent more time chasing experiences and living this life. I got one go at this, and what did I do with it? It's about a prioritization, and he did that. And it inspired me to make this episode about seizing the moments, because so many people out there, just like we've talked about, continue to wait. They continue to go, one day I'll make a big trip to Bailey's. One day I'll do, this huge road trip of a lifetime. And tomorrow never comes. But all around us every day are little adventures, things that get us out, get us going. Just for me, myself, I reprioritized to start to try to get the experiences. It started in self-preservation, just to get out of my house, to not be at home with depression, to go out and live, and realizing how big and beautiful this world is and how much awesomeness and awesome people are out there when you get out and you go and you do, right? And then that led to the YouTube channel, and then that led to the podcast, and then that led to going back to school. Like, it's like slow steps, progress, doors start to open, and we're still in the middle of trying to get some doors open. But things are happening, and it's all about seizing those opportunities, seizing those moments. And that's what tonight's episode is about. So thank you, Hugo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time to make contact and connect with me. And thank you for inspiring this episode. A shout out to you and your family out there. I hope all is well in your world. So let's get into tonight's show. What we're going to do here is, I had this list growing of little things, I always like to pepper little pieces of the stuff I'm doing in my life into the show towards the beginning somewhere. And because I haven't made a show in 6 weeks, they've been piling up like crazy. A lot of the reason it's been 6 weeks since we've made a show is because a lot of these things got in the way of that. But here's the deal. All of these things were moments that I seized because they were here, they were in front of me, there was something special about it, and it was worth going to do. So I thought, you know what? That is almost an episode in itself. Catching you guys up on all these little tidbits that I've had, but also I've been hearing from some of you guys, and I've gotten some updates from some of the friends of the show who are out there seizing moments too, and along with Hugo telling me his story and kind of catalyzing this idea tonight, I'm inspired. And I wasn't really particularly inspired about any of those other episodes on my plate, on the back burner rather, waiting to go to the plate. So that's what we're going with. So we're going to tell a bunch of little stories, and you guys hang around to the end, because I'm going to have a little bit of a travelogue towards the end. I recently, just this last weekend, took my daughter on a big adventure, her first one. Super special story. And it's kind of a travelogue that many of you can go and do for yourselves if you're here stateside anyway. So hang around. We're going to be talking about traveling tonight. We're going to be talking about adventures. We're going to be talking about living our lives, seizing the moments, and basically taking control of our free time. Yes, we're all slaves to the man. No, we can't all up and sell everything and go across the ocean and live forever. It just doesn't work that way. But that's the point of this show, isn't it? to try to bring everyone back to reality, to remind you with a gentle but loving slap in the face, you're going to die eventually. And when you do, are you going to regret how you lived? Let's not regret how we lived. You know, I think that's a great way to order your life. And I've done that for the last 7 years or so. I think about things before I react to them. I respond to things and I think about it. Will I regret this someday if I do it? And if so, I won't do it. And if I think, will I regret this someday if I don't do it? I'll find a way to do it. You have to do that responsibly because we still have bills to pay next month, right? Grant you that. But there's a lot that can be done. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So let's get into it by catching up with a couple of our friends. Number one, Mary, our friend of Mary R., who wrote in and I was in contact with a couple of months ago. She's been a little bit persona non grata for a couple of months. Do you know why? Because Mary's been hiking from a town whose name I can't pronounce in France to another town whose name I can't pronounce in Spain to the tune of, I've written this down, 478 miles over 34 days. Holy God, that is insane. Can you guys imagine? That's like what? That's a backpack trip across Europe. Isn't that what everyone aspires to? So Mary has been out there seizing a moment, which I think a lot of us may aspire to. Maybe we'll seize that moment someday when the time is right. So that's an update from Mary. And then also Rob C. from up in St. Louis. He and his wife and his family are out in the Smoky Mountains, and they are seizing moments as well. And last I heard from him, their trash cans outside of their little cabin had been ransacked by bears, and it does not get any more Great Smoky Mountains than having your stuff ransacked by bears, does it? And they had completed, get this, a 9-mile hike with over 2,400 feet of elevation gain. But from what I hear and what I could see, the views were worth every foot of that gain. And that, too, is really, really seizing the moments. Like, guys, that's the point. That's the point. Make the time, make the place in your world. You have to plan. You have to do some budgeting. There's stuff that has to be done to get these moments. But if you don't, the moments happen anyway, don't they? They happen without you. And then you didn't get to experience it. And at the end of the day, what is really left? After this life is over, what's really left? Other than your memories and the experiences and the memories you made, maybe even more importantly, the memories you made with your family, with your friends, with the people that are close to you that they get to carry on when you're gone. They say that a man dies 2 deaths, don't they? His physical death, and then the last time someone says his name or her name, or perhaps remembers you. Don't you want to leave some memories behind? Nobody wants to die twice. Right? Leave a legacy. Leave a legacy, even if it's just the memories that you shared. I think that's important. I think that's important. Well, to me, it's important anyway. So let's move forward. So a couple of the things talked about, there's been a few things that have been going on in the last few weeks that have kept me from being able to record, put a time crunch on homework and all that. One of those things is the Northern Lights. How many of you guys here stateside, or anywhere in the world really, in the Northern Hemisphere, but closer to the equator, actually got to see, well, it's about midway, don't let me misquote, actually got to see the Northern Lights. It's a rare occurrence here in Arkansas. And we did. I was sitting here doing homework, as a matter of fact, and another friend of the show, our night hiker, our Roton night hiker of Roton, Josh, from St. Louis, he sent me a text. I hadn't heard from him in a minute, and I get a text. He's like, dude, are you seeing this? Can you see the lights down there? I'm like, what lights? And then I pull up Facebook and see all these pictures of the Northern Lights, and I see that people are saying the only way you can get this is through your stinking smartphone. It's got the night exposure on. So I went outside, and I got a really cool picture of the Northern Lights right from my front porch. But in that moment, I decided to seize a moment. I thought, you know what? What is the closest place? This is like 9:30 at night, right? And I should be doing homework. But as any good college student will tell you, Any reason to not do homework is a great reason to not do homework. And I thought, you know what would be the closest place I can get to? Because peak was supposed to be between like 9 and, well, I think it said like 11 and 1 a.m., something like that. And I was like, I surely can get part of the way up the hill into the Ozarks. Where's an overlook I could go to? And I thought, oh, the overlook over Lake Fort Smith off of the 71 scenic bypass, Old Highway 71. I thought, you know what? That sounds like a fun adventure. And I seized the moment. I grabbed my good camera, the Canon, and I brought my phone. And I loaded up and headed up the hill. And guess what? I spent the better part of an hour and a half waiting for the light's intensity to return. And it never did. The best photo I got was right from my driveway. But you know what I did? I went out on an adventure. I spent an hour, maybe a little longer, hanging out with who knows how many other people came and went to the same place, had the same idea I did, and tried to get pictures of the Northern Lights and sat there and talked. One of the ladies that was right there next to me for the whole time, she was a Lake Fort Smith State Park employee. And I was like, can you give me a job? And she was like, I'm not over that department. And I was like, fine then. But I made some new friends. I got to hang out for a couple of hours. I chased a little quirky side adventure and it got me out of the house. And that was fun. See, those are little moments that happen sometimes out of nowhere and you have to seize them. You have to go do it or you miss out on everything. Yeah, I could have gotten another hour's worth of homework done, and I would have went to bed with a headache and with no color in my life. But because I chased the Northern Lights, I got actually quite a bit of color into my life that night. And those are the things that keep us going from day to day, aren't they? They are for me. Guys, that's what this life is all about. This world is big and crazy. And experiencing it is insane. You're talking to a guy here once, that one time, for real, when I was in San Francisco working for FedEx, I literally drove to the coast to meet an incoming storm head on in like January, simply because those storms coming in off the ocean on the central coast of California are famous. And I'd never experienced one. So I drove an hour over to the ocean. And I stood there and got pelted by freezing cold rain and winds that were trying to rip my jacket off of my back. And I had never been quite that happy, probably ever up until that point in my life, because there's something about experiencing things like that that is an irreplaceable thing in life. You can't relive that by watching it on TV. You can't relive that by watching a video on YouTube. You can only sense that by being in it. And it was awesome. And I drove home, basically in my boxers, soaking wet, trying to dry out with the heater on high and thanking goodness that I didn't get pulled over by a California Highway Patrol officer. Oh gosh, old Ponch, he would have had a good time with me, wouldn't he? That would have been strange. But the point is, I went and I lived it. So yeah, that's me. I'm that kind of person. So these little things really get me fired up and get me going. Maybe that's not the case for all of you, but I think if you've never experienced such, if you'd give it a try, you might find it excites you more than you think. Moving on from there, have another little adventure. It's been a crazy couple of months here, y'all. We get a freaking solar eclipse once in a lifetime, at least here in our state, kind of event. We get the Northern Lights, which is pretty much a once in a lifetime event here in our state. Also, we have like a 17-year or 14-year cicada hatch, which sounds like, if you're down, at least when I was down in the Ouachitas a couple of weeks ago, it literally sounded like, I don't know, lasers from alien spaceships in the woods. And it was so loud that it almost hurt your ears and it was eerie. And I had to ask someone at a state park, I was like, what is that noise? And they were like, yeah, I'm working on a handout right now because you're like the 400th person that asked that today. It's this 17-year cicada hatch, which is basically, they said it's like a 1 in 200 and something year event or 170-year event. But apparently there's a couple of different cicada hatches. Like there's like yearly cicada hatches and then there's like 17-year hatches. I don't know. I'm not a biologist or an entomologist. But they all happened at the same, some of them happened at the same time this year. And they've all like synced up and they're cicada-ing at the same time. And it's deafening and it's eerie. It's crazy. So anyway, weird things are happening. Weird things are happening. The next thing I expect to happen is for our Falk monster down in Falk, Arkansas to like sprout wings and become our very first Mothman sighting. That's probably what's next on my plate or our plate. And I'm all for that. That would make life a lot more interesting. And I'm all about the cryptids. But, and if you've never heard of Falk monster, just Google it. It's an interesting story. We did a TV show on it once several years ago. But we had something else that went on that was a little bit less esoteric and a little bit more here in the real world that was very interesting. So I live in an area that is crossed from basically basically Kansas City into Mexico by the Kansas City Southern Railway lines. Well, a couple of years ago, they merged with Canadian Pacific to create the first truly 3-country transcontinental railroad in North America. So they have lines that go coast to coast in Canada. They come straight down from Canada through Kansas City all the way down into Mexico to the Panama Canal, if I'm not incorrect on that. And so, to celebrate this merger, Canadian Pacific broke out their have been refurbishing actually, their steam train from the early 20th century. It's not 1800s, it's early 1900s. They call it the Empress. It's Canadian Pacific 2816. And they were going to run this steam train all the way from Canada to Mexico. Now, I've known about this for 2 years. You guys know I'm a railroad nerd. We've talked about this. And I grew up on the Kansas City Southern lines. My grandfather was a brakeman, the guy that rode in the caboose and then walked along the top of boxcars and cranked off the handbrakes back in the days before they had pneumatic brakes and all these different things. It was a whole different time, way more dangerous. And so I've always been kind of fascinated with trains, and especially the KCS. I grew up watching those engines keeping me from getting to school on time. At least that's what I told my teachers, right? And that was a valid excuse in Heavener. There's a train across the tracks. Nobody questioned it beyond that because everyone had suffered that fate at some point, right? But they're going to run this steam train all the way to Mexico. So like for 2 years, I've been like, I'm going to take a day off work. I'm going to be there. I'm going to chase this thing all the way to wherever. I'm going to do it. This is a once in a lifetime thing. This is going to be cool. I've got to get my pictures. I got to get my video, right? Well, it finally rolls around to this year. I've used up most of my PTO. Part of it's coming this week, y'all. This Thursday and Friday, as you're listening to this episode, if you're listening on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, I will be doing archaeology down in DeQueen. I'll be playing archaeology with the real archaeologist. And I'm so grateful to them for being so kind to allow us avocationalists and just regular old anthropologists to come and play archaeology with them and learn and get some training. But I've used up most of my days this year by seizing other moments. You understand? So I was like, crap, that's just it. I'm just going to miss it. It's not going to happen for me, and that makes me sad. Maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe it'll come through on a weekend on the return trip, but comes about, doesn't look like it's going to happen, and I wrote it off. I just wrote it off. Would have been super cool. I would have loved to have taken my daughter to chase it, but I just wrote it off. And then here a couple of weeks ago, I happened to open up Facebook early in the afternoon, just after lunch at work, and I see that it's leaving Joplin, Missouri, headed south. And it's like 1:30-ish or so, maybe 2 in the afternoon. And I was like, Joplin by rail, yo, hey, that might pass through here right after work. Really? And all of a sudden, I was like, wait. I'm like Lloyd in Dumb and Dumber. And I'm like, so you're telling me there's a chance? So I started paying attention, keeping track, because they had a tracker on their website showing its exact location through like a GPS nodule. So I'm keeping track. We roll around to like 4:45, 5 o'clock, right about time to clock out of the old salt mine. And I check and I see, and it's just maybe, gosh, I don't know how many rail miles it would be, but I'm estimating, I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that's probably only 30 or 40 minutes from passing through Sallisaw. Sallisaw is only roughly 20 minutes from me here. I may still get to see this thing. So I went on an impromptu adventure. I seized the moment. And I always have my camera in the car, right? So I took off and I went bailing down Highway 64 into Oklahoma. And I ended up, as I was going, figuring out I might be able to intercept it north of Sallisaw near Marble City. We're just going to see what happens. I'm going to find a rail grade crossing somewhere out there. Y'all, this adventure took me out there, and I got there, and within about 10 minutes, that train was coming around the corner. So I seized the moment that presented itself to me through no planning of my own and happened to actually get the pictures and the video of CP 2816, the Empress, chugging its way down the Ozark foothills into the river valley. And it's super cool. You can go over to my Instagram, Instagram.com/waywardson119, and see those pictures in that video. It's really, really super cool. But I seized the moment. And y'all, it was cool. Let me tell you something about that in particular. That is one of those things. Anyone, especially here in the U.S., who's ever heard the old country music, the old songs, the Hank Williams Seniors and the Merle Haggards a little bit later, and the Johnny Cashes, trains, freight trains, hobos, that whole train culture was such a huge part of folk music, which country music was a part of. And they always talk about the whistle, the lonesome whistle, the mournful sound of the whistle. Well, anyone that's heard a modern diesel, I mean, that thing blasts, right? It blares. It hurts your ears. You don't think of it as a mournful sound. Even when you hear it in the distance, when there's storms on the horizon, here on the plains, when you're out in the plains, you can hear a train 30 miles away sometimes when the wind carries the horn. It still doesn't sound, it's interesting and it's creepy, but it doesn't sound that mournful. It's a very powerful sound. As I was waiting, and I'm with like 30 or 40 people who were waiting, including CPKC, which is the new moniker, Canadian Pacific Kansas City, CPKC, Railroad Police, making sure no one gets run over by the train. As we're waiting, we're watching. No one's got phone service, so we don't know where it's at. We don't know if it's broken down because it's been having to make several maintenance stops because it's an old steam engine, right? You got to lubricate that, dude. There's a lot that goes on with those things. And all of a sudden, and I actually settled myself. I went over to the railroad police guy and I said, hey, listen, if anyone here looks like they know what's going on, it's you. Where can I stand? And he said, anywhere this side of the crossing gates or that side of the crossing gates, just nowhere closer to the tracks than that. And I was like, so there's like 40 people here next to you. There's no one right across the road to my left at all. I was like, is that off limits? Is that private property? And he's like, no, I mean, the railroad's got like 50 feet of right of way. And I was like, do you know why no one's over there? And he's like, I don't know, maybe the grass is too high for him. So guess where I went? I was going to get a picture without having to worry about someone stepping into it. So I was 50 yards closer to wherever the train was coming from. Had a great shot. But as I'm standing there and I've set up the camera, I've practiced on cameras, like I set it up for, sporting, like continuous shooting. So when I push that button, it's going to shutter until I quit pushing the button, because this is a once in a lifetime, for me. I'm not taking any chances. So I've practiced, I've framed it up, I've set it up, and I'm ready to go. And we're all just waiting, and everyone's waiting, getting antsy. And all of a sudden, way off down the valley in the distance around the curve, like you could not see this train anywhere, but you heard that old air horn, that steam-powered air horn. Let me tell you something. Until you hear that in the distance echoing down a valley, you can't really understand what they're talking about in those old songs. But mournful is the right word. Haunting is the right word. It was so cool. And then you start to hear it coming around the bend. Chicka, 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 chicka. And here it comes. It makes the corner and you can see the steam clouds. And y'all, I don't care if you don't like trains. I don't care if you don't like history. That is an experience. And it's an experience you may get a shot at if you live anywhere between Texas and essentially probably Chicago or Wisconsin. I don't know where it entered the U.S., but they have to return from Mexico here in a few weeks. So keep your eyes open. If you're interested, go to CPKC's website or just Google the Empress CP 2816. If you're interested in that at all, check it out. It may be passing right through your area and you may get a shot at it. And I suggest it because, y'all, it was like the coolest stinking thing ever. Anyway, we've run on to 30 minutes here, y'all. We're at the break, so let's go to an ad from our sponsors. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you about a few more adventures that came from seizing the moment. We'll be right back. What is up, all of you wayward souls? I want to tell you guys about our newest sponsor, Bendetti Optics, a brand based right here in the good old US of A, Portland, Oregon, to be exact. And I bought my first pair of Bendetti sunglasses about 1.5 years ago and fell in love with them, so much so that I got online and ordered a couple of more pair. And when I did, there was a small shipping snafu, an order fulfillment snafu, and I got on the phone, gave them a call, and guess what? I get a call back from who? One of the big men themselves, right there in Portland, from the top of the chain. Have a great conversation, and we end up starting this great relationship we have. They more than made right the little snafu that occurred, and I am now a huge proponent of them because I can tell you from personal experience they are good people, and they're trying to compete with the big boys out there, coming in at a price point of about $40, but using the exact same frame material, TR90, and the same polarization process as the big guys. As it turns out, something I think we are already probably knew in our hearts, when you buy big name sunglasses, you're buying a big name, not necessarily any more quality than you can get somewhere else, like at Bendetti Optics. They have 29 different styles. They have multiple polarization options for whatever climate you happen to live in. And they back it up with like this lifetime guarantee that if your dog eats your sunglasses, it doesn't matter how you break them, send it back in with a check to cover shipping and handling and you're golden. You got a new pair on the way. These guys are truly trying to do it right. And they have this philosophy that a really good pair of sunglasses should not cost you so much that you are afraid to wear them. And I think all of us outdoorsmen can relate to that. So if you guys, like me, are very practical and like to get more bang for your buck and wear some great looking sunglasses, check out BendettiOptics.com. That's BendeTti optics.com. Or you can go over to Instagram /BendettiOptics. And that I highly suggest, whether you buy a pair or not, just to check out the cutest pupper you'll ever see modeling sunglasses. Once again, that's BendettiOptics.com. And make sure and let them know Wayward Stories sent you. And welcome back. Thank you guys for hanging around through our sponsor breaks. So let's get on with tonight's show. I've got a couple of cool stories to tell you guys about here. And these are all seizing the moment stories. I have a couple of shorter ones, and then I'm going to tell you about my big adventure with my daughter to wrap this guy out. It's going to be super cool. You guys are really going to like that one. But I'm going to start with a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that came up, a moment seized for my daughter and I, was we had gone up to Fort Gibson. She has come to really love museums, which is so cool to me. That makes my heart and my soul so happy. This girl loves to read. She's reading at like a 10th grade level. She's in 3rd grade. Well, she just finished 3rd grade and started her summer. She's a nerd, and I love it. I love it. She's proud of it, and I'm here for it. And anyway, she's really into this, probably because daddy is. I'm kind of raised her this way, but this is cool because for years here, I've been slowly trying to work her out of the house into doing things. Actually, we're going to talk about that more with our last adventure. So let's just we went up to Fort Gibson, seizing the moment. Turned out they were having their bread baking day. What that is Fort Gibson, 200-year-old fort. From the Western expansion, 200 years old this year. And they, once a year, bake sourdough bread as the soldiers would have ate it by the same recipe in the very same oven that bread was baked in 200 years ago. So I was like, well, let's go up there. I was like, they've got a cool little museum. They've got this awesome fort recreation of what it was like 200 years ago. I was like, do you want to go? She was like, yeah. So we went and we got some 200-year-old bread. No, but bread that was baked in a 200-year-old oven with a 200-year-old recipe at least. And it was actually really, really good. And she loved it. That was super cool. So we seized an opportunity that I just happened to see on Facebook, but that led to another opportunity to seize, which was this. And this is what I want to tell you. While we were there, I told them, I was like, hey, give me the real lowdown about what's going on here at Fort Gibson, because Fort Gibson is intricately linked to the story of Fort Smith, which is where I volunteer and interpret right? The more I can go to these places, the broader context I can get, right? The better I'm going to be at teaching people when I get to tell the stories. And so they were like, oh, you're down at Fort Smith. Awesome. And then they gave me all the lowdown. And they were like, you guys, you're going to be here in 2 weeks, right? And I was like, well, what's in 2 weeks? And they were like, our 200th like extravaganza, 200th birthday extravaganza. We're going to have living history. Everyone here is going to be in period costume. We're going to have a keel boat row up the river, like an authentic to spec keel boat, not a 200-year-old one, but one that's built to the spec of the time, which is how everyone traveled back then. These rivers were like the interstates of their day, right? The roads sucked. The rivers were at least passable, and if you had the right kind of boat, you could get anywhere. And it was the fastest form of transportation, even though it was still miserable. Can you imagine poling a boat against the current in, say, the Mississippi or the Arkansas or the Missouri, some massive river? Anyway, that's what they did. That's how people rolled 200 years ago. And I looked at my daughter and I was like, well, I would love to do that. That'd be cool. Do you want to do that? Because I was like on the fence. Well, we've already been here. And you know how kids are, their attention spans, right? And she was like, oh my gosh, that'll be awesome. She was so psyched. And that got me psyched because she was legitimately, genuinely psyched. I've told you guys before, I'm an empath. I can tell if you're lying to me. You don't even have to say a word and I know who you are, right? She was genuine. She meant it. She was psyched. And I was like, yes, this is great. This is going to be cool. This is something she's interested in. She's going to get the experience of a lifetime. Because living history, y'all, if you're a nerd like me at all, it's such a cool experience. And you get knowledge, like expert knowledge from people who portray these guys. And the reason they portray them is because they're interested in it. So we went back. We seized the opportunity to go and check out their 200th celebration. You know, that only happens once every 100 years, I suspect. This is probably the only time it's ever happened. I doubt they did it at 100 years. But we got to go and she got to see all these things. We learned how to use a sextant, for God's sakes. We met a new friend named Perry Bowlegs. He is a member of the Seminole Nation. He was like the former historic preservation officer for the Seminole Nation. And we spent a long time talking to him, getting his perspective on stuff. And that was so cool. And it's kind of crazy. It's not exactly the perspective you would expect. That's why each individual story is so important, right? But the coolest thing that we got to see was that keel boat. And they announced it. The keel boats are coming. Actually, they announced it with a cannon shot. So we took off and we find our way to this old historic bridge of all things to watch them come under us. And you can hear them coming up river and they're rowing along. They've got a rhythm, right? And they're rowing and they're rowing and we get it replete with a genuine sea shanty. These guys are like, and we'll row the old chariots along, we'll row the old chariot along, we'll row the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll row the old. It was awesome. It was so cool, y'all. Yeah, it's a reenactment. Yeah, you know it's not real like at the time, but you're seeing it exactly as it would have happened in a boat that is exactly as it would have been, dressed with men dressed just as they would have been, singing just like they would have. It was so cool. And my daughter was over the moon about this. Do you understand? That's seizing moments. See, you don't have to wait to go to Belize. Was this less glamorous than Belize? Or anywhere else? Name anywhere else you'd like to go. Probably. But was it something cool as hell to do on a Saturday? Yeah, it was. And it didn't cost $10,000 like Belize will. Do you understand? There's life to live and it happens around us, and you can do these little things and get out and seize these moments and have like added value to your life. You can travel just a few hours in one direction and be in a new like cultural ecosystem of a sort, like even a natural ecosystem. I'm in a river valley here and it's ugly most of the time. Like, especially on summer afternoons, it's so depressing because you got so much haze in the air and the light gets that weird kind of blown out kind of color to it. And it's kind of like whited out. You go up the hill an hour, you go south up the hill an hour, you're in the mountains, beautiful mountains, waterfalls, rivers, streams. Guys, travel makes life fuller. Experiences makes life fuller, makes it richer, makes it happier in the end. And you have a memory that will far outlast you with someone else who's going to far outlast you. And you've left a legacy of living life, hopefully for that child or those family members to say, I really enjoyed that. I'm going to do this for my life. And you start a generational cycle. We're constantly, in today's age, we're trying to break generational curses. That's a real thing that we need to do. Like generational curses of poverty, generational curses of just believing in a system that's been screwing us for 200 or 300 years. Like, we're breaking out of these cycles, but we need to build new ones too. Cycles are good. Traditions can be good, but you got to build good ones. And things like this build good traditions because they build good memories and they show people, yo, there's more to this life than just working it away for someone else. When you're done working it away, there's still time in your life to do other things, to create your own memories and your own good things. Anyway, I'm all kinds on a soapbox tonight. Listen, when you're at the bottom tier of the sociostrata, you think a lot about why you're here and what it costs you every day. Anyway, next adventure we're going to talk about was a quick little weekend adventure to just a state park that I took my daughter on, Mount Magazine. She wanted to get out of the house. We didn't want to sit around all day and feel depressed. So I went, it's only an hour to Mount Magazine. They've got some cool little displays in Paris, Arkansas. They've got a little like Eiffel Tower type of situation because obviously Paris. I got an awesome train engine on display, which kids love that stuff. You remember crawling around on old static displays of cabooses and engines? They got a really cool restored engine that doesn't run, but restored aesthetically from the actual coal fields that were there in that area 100 years ago. So that's cool. And then you've got the state park. And my daughter had never been there. And I was like, do you want to go? I was like, it has awesome views. We can get your state park stamps. And actually, you're almost to getting a sticker for having enough stamps in your book. And they have some geocaches up on the mountain. You want to go up and check it out? And so we did. We seized the moment. We drove over there and we just went on a patented Wayward Son mini adventure, which was let's just go explore and see what happens today. We went out, we had lunch, we went up the mountain. She got to see the views and she thought that was the coolest thing ever. We watched these like vultures. They weren't exactly pretty birds, but we watched these vultures because we had a strong wind out of the west riding the thermals all over, like right above our head, up on these bluffs and overlooks, right? We went looking for a geocache. We got her state park stamps. It was a cool adventure that allowed us to kill a Sunday afternoon where we didn't just sit here in the house and get depressed because it was go home from daddy's day anyway. We're both always sad on those days. You know, the end of a weekend sucks if you're divorced and have shared custody for everyone, right? We're both sad on those days anyway. Let's find something to do. Let's get out of the house. Let's not just sit here and feel sluggish and gross. Let's go live. And we did. And she loved it. And anyway, this leads us to the last story I'm going to tell tonight. And it'll probably take us all the way out. We're at 13 minutes. It'll definitely take us the next 17 or so because this is a real, pretty darn good travelogue adventure. And I hope you all stuck around to listen. And I'm going to start by setting some context here. Divorces are traumatic for everyone, especially the kids, more so for the kids. And it doesn't matter if you were an innocent victim in your divorce. It doesn't matter if you did what you had to and it was totally justified. I know many people who had to leave abusive situations and you're totally justified. No matter, it still causes trauma. And my child was no different. You know, I didn't want my divorce, but I didn't get a choice in the matter. And her and I being separated, I raised that child. We had that bond and we still do to this day, but to be separated from someone that you're that close to at that young of an age, 3 years old, it was traumatic for both of us. I, fortunately, with age, had more tools and experience to learn how to cope with that trauma. A 3-year-old does not. And so one of the ways her trauma played out was when she's here with me for the last, 7 years now? Good God, 6.5 years. It was almost impossible to get her out of the house because what she wanted to do, her brain equated. You guys know how time flies when you're having fun? Well, that's true. We experience time differently based on whether if we're miserable or happy. Well, if we went and did stuff together, she quickly equated that our weekend disappeared in the blink of an eye, and she didn't like that. So it was like pulling teeth to get her to leave the house. So we would sit all weekend and we would watch Paw Patrol, and then it was graduated to My Little Pony. And side note, I still say to this day, everything any of us needs to know, we could learn from My Little Pony. Like, respect people, be kind, share, basic human stuff that we all forget when we turn into adults for some reason. Anyway, I kind of dug My Little Pony. I was not a brony, but I did like the show. It was a progression that I had to actively cultivate and work. It started out with going to a friend of mine's house that had a daughter that was close to her age. We'd go to Tom's house. Her and his daughter would play together. Tom and I would play a video game or just talk or whatever, and I could get a couple of hours out of her. And it was slow progression. And we got this little water park here in Fort Smith, and I could get her to the water park. What kid doesn't love a water park? So I could get 2 or 3 hours there. So for the last 5 years, I've been slowly trying to pry her out, because what I wanted all along was to turn her into my little travel buddy, because I love to travel and adventure and explore. And I was hoping that she would love that too. And if she didn't, that would be fine. But I wanted to have the opportunity, and it's good and it's healthy on every level to get the hell out of the house and not just sit and get lazy and get unhealthy and just experience world through a stupid TV set. That's not healthy on any level. I wanted to cultivate a little adventurer in her, right? So I would get what I could get slowly, getting her more and more and more used to it. And this last year, I've been able to get her out for entire days on Saturday, right? Got her into metal detecting. We got into some geocaching, and I just kept finding more and more things that really resonated with her. And it turns out, going to museums and historic sites and science, sites and anything that's really interesting, she's into it. So here this last weekend, well, a couple of weeks ago, she had gotten psyched about something. And I was like, well, we could go. We could do this thing. We could stay the night somewhere even. Kids love hotels, right? I love a hotel. And she was like, oh, that would be awesome. And I was like, oh, we've arrived. This is the moment that I've been building for, right? And anyway, it didn't happen, just by circumstance. And she was a little disappointed, but she's a very understanding child. And I promised her, I said, next Daddy weekend, we're going to go on a big adventure. We're going to stay an overnight adventure somewhere. We're going to do this thing. Are you down? And she was like, I am so with that. She was psyched. So I started looking around. Got to find somewhere to go. We really like these passport programs. It's fun. Gives you a reason to go somewhere. And with the National Park Service, you got your passport. And I love those just because it's such a cool record of everywhere you've been. Mine's getting full. At least some of the regions. California's getting pretty full, Midwest getting very full. Southwest regions getting pretty darn full. I'm going to have to buy some of those expanders to go in there so that I can have some more pages. But she loves doing that. And she loves to get a little pin for her backpack. Every site now has their little pin, $3 or $4. It's a little tchotchke, doesn't cost anything. But the national parks, they have the Junior Ranger program. And this could be an episode in its own right that I need to make someday. But all these programs to get you outside. And so I said, why don't we go up to Wilson's Creek in Missouri? It's a 3-hour drive. It's they have a really awesome, beautifully done museum. They've got a cool little Junior Ranger booklet. And then we could go stay in Springfield. If we go into Springfield, there's a lot of things we could find to get into, or we could just stay at the hotel and we could swim or whatever. And she was like, let's do this. So I'm psyched, right? I'm psyched. So we took our adventure. I even got her up and out of bed early, and we got on the road, and we had a grand time, y'all. And from this point forward, listen closely, because you're about to hear about several things that are really, really cool to do in and around Springfield, Missouri. Number one, we did go to Wilson's Creek. Wilson's Creek was it was one of the first largest battles of the Civil War. It was big at the time. It was the largest battle west of the Mississippi, like the Trans-Mississippi Theater. And it's like a really well preserved battlefield. It's where the first Union general of the entire war was killed. There is a extant structure, a witness structure on site that a family watched the whole battle from their front porch, or the father did, and the kids hid in the cellar. That's all there. And they've got the awesome museum, and it's like a driving tour, and you can go to the museum. And anyway, they swagged us out, y'all. We did the Junior Ranger program. She did the Junior Ranger program. And for we adults, they had, and this is kind of unique, I haven't seen this elsewhere yet, the Not So Junior Ranger program, which was a little bit tougher to complete. But they swagged us out. She got not only her cool little Junior Ranger badge, which is so cool. You know what? Hang tight. Here's what a regular, if you're watching on YouTube, here's what a regular, let's say, Junior Ranger badge looks like. This is my Junior Ranger badge from the Buffalo National River. Well, this is the one they had at Wilson's Creek. This is like a kind of a older run thing. This is plastic, but it's all gold and shiny, so it's great for kids. They love it. And so we got our little badges, but they also gave us patches to the same effect. And her, because she filled out her entire booklet, because they have these booklets and you have to answer questions. The point is, you go through the park and you learn. You go through the museum and you learn, and you have to answer these questions. We only have to answer so many of the things in the book. You don't have to do all the activities, just the ones that are marked in a specific way to actually get your badge. She did the whole booklet, and she got a special pin to go with her badge, which was a gold pin to fit right on her backpack. And it was shiny gold, right? I mean, it's gold colored plated, but it's awesome. And she was over the moon, right? Awesome thing to do with your kids, y'all. The Junior Ranger program. And y'all, there's like over 400, or is it over 300 national parks administered sites? I think it's over 400. They're everywhere. They're historic sites, they're national monuments, they're national parks, and they all have these programs. And it's a great way to get your kids outside. And also, I even got off track. Sorry, I got off track of the theme of tonight's show. This was an opportunity. This was me seizing the moment. The time had come that I had cultivated for all this time, hoping and praying and working towards getting her to go on longer weekend adventures so we could really go explore outside of like an hour radius further, right? This is an opportunity. This is a seize the moment kind of situation. So sorry, I had to backtrack. I had to digress for a moment, like so you guys would understand why I'm telling you this story, because this is like the biggest seized moment for my daughter and I of like the last 6 or 7 years. This is big. This is a game changer for us. Anyway, we do all this at Wilson's Creek. We get the cool adventure. We get the cool swag, and it was cool. She even got a book. She found a book that she wanted, and I'm here for that. I'm here for her learning these things. And what this book was courageous stories of courageous women in the Civil War, something to that effect. And she was psyched about it. She wanted that book, and I was like, I can't tell you no. You want to read about these courageous women? This is like everything I want you to do. I want you to be interested in history, because history is like teaches us the lessons of how to live better in the future. It teaches us lessons about a better world by the mistakes we've made, learning about the mistakes we've made. But it's also about strong women, courageous women. And there's nothing I want more in this world than my daughter to be a strong, courageous woman. I don't want her to be susceptible to narcissists, to anyone that would ever abuse her. And the best way to do that is with intelligence. To be smart, intelligent, and strong. So I'm like, I can't tell you no. Anyway, she gets her book. She loves it. She read the heck out of it. Super cool. But from Wilson's Creek, we had to find something to do, right? So I'm Googling. I just give it a quick Google while we're sitting. And I was like, okay, we've got a couple of options here. We can go to Fantastic Caverns, which is like a cave tour where they pull you through in these carts on a Jeep, right? And that was pricey. I was like, ooh, that would be awesome. But this is already costing a small fortune for me, Justin, anyway. I don't have this kind of money, but I'm seizing the moment, right? I'm seizing the opportunity to set this precedent, and I want this to be special for her. I want her to see how much fun just going and blowing in the world by the seat of your pants, right, can be. how much fun the adventure is. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's an option. But what else is there? And then I see it real close to where we're actually going to stay. Pythian Castle. Okay, now this is going to require a little context for you guys, but they have a history tour / ghost tour. Pythian Castle. Now, what the Pythian Castle is in Springfield is a Gothic revival looking castle that was built at the turn of the century. And what the Pythian Castle was it was a old person's home and a care center for family members of the Knights of Pythias. What are the Knights of Pythias, you might ask? Well, I'll answer your question by confusing you even further. Have you ever heard of the International Order of Oddfellows? Okay, no. Have you ever heard of the Elks Lodge? Have you ever heard of the Masons? Okay, I know you've heard of Masons. Masons a little different, a little more secretive. They've got a lot of great conspiracy theories about them. But what the Knights of Pythias were is back in the Knights of Pythias were formed right after the Civil War. This is an old organization, and I just found out is still active to this day. Not at this castle, though. So what they are is they were like a form of social security before we had governmental social security. Okay, this is the International Order of Oddfellows, the Lumbermen of the World. There's all these fraternal organizations. And what they did was you paid your dues, and they worked as a form of social security. If you, say, died prematurely and you were one of the lumbermen of the world or whatever, I forget what it's called, the woodworkers. Anyway, say you were a Knight of Pythias and you died in your vocation too early. Your wife and your kids could have a place to live and a place to stay in one of these castles. They called them castles. They worked after Greek mythology with this whole, ever heard of Pythagoras? The Pythagorean triangle? Okay, all that stuff. Anyway, it's Knights of Pythias. And you paid your dues, and it worked as Social Security. You could go there when you got old. If you had nowhere to live, if you fell on hard times, they took care of you. And it was really pretty cool the way these fraternal organizations worked. Well, they called their little places like this, their homes, castles, and also where they would meet, castles. This one is either, from what I could tell, the only one or one of the only ones that was actually built to look like a castle. And it is so cool. And anyway, there's a family that owns it now, and it's open for ghost tours. And so I'm seizing the moment, right? It was actually really reasonable for my daughter and I to go. And I asked her, I said, hey, listen, you cool with this? You think you could have fun with this? You think it'd be scary? She's been really interested in all these different kinds of things here lately. And I was like, would you be scared or would you go? I was like, I can tell you any ghost tour I've ever been on, they're basically history tours. And then they tell you about ghosts that they have on the property that people have seen or reported. And she's like, oh, this would be awesome. Let's do it. And so we signed it up to go. And we did, in the spirit of seizing the moment. And get this. This was so cool. We got there. Turns out that day was the 110th birthday of that building. And we got to be a part of a little birthday picture that they took. And my daughter got to hold the 1 in 110 at the top of the stairs in this group photo they took. And we all got a cookie to boot. Happy birthday, Pythian Castle. Happy birthday, Justin. I got a cookie. Anyway, it was so cool, y'all. We did this tour and my daughter ate it up. She was so psyched. She loved every second of it. And she even did one of the biggest, bravest big girl things I've ever seen for her so far. She wanted to go down to the end of the tunnel that they had. They have their creepy, service tunnel. And they're like, anyone who wants to go, we won't make anyone, but anyone who wants to go can go down to the end of the tunnel and we'll go lights out for 2 minutes. And she wanted to go. She was like hyping herself up. It was so cute. She's like, I can do this. She's like, I want to do this, Daddy. And I was like, you don't have to do it. She's like, I want to do it. She's like, you only get chances like this every once in a while. You got to overcome your fears, right? And I was like, that's right, girl. You got to overcome your fears. I love it. And so we did. And we went down to the end of that tunnel and they turned out those lights for 2 minutes and she was brave as hell. Y'all, I was creeped out. She was brave as hell. And she managed it. And she was so proud of herself when we got done. And those are the moments. See, that's why you seize moments, because those moments come from seizing moments. That was one of the most special moments for me, to see her growing up before my eyes. It may sound silly, A little ghost tour, it may sound silly to you, but if you've got a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, you may just understand what I'm talking about. To watch those kids, I mean, she took that on herself. You have to overcome your fears, right? I mean, she's heard that everywhere. I've taught her that. But in that moment, she owned it. She decided you have to overcome your fears. And she did it. And she did it in a pretty dang big, grand way, if you ask me. Because even I was like, no, this is cool. I'm all for this, but I'm 43. And there ain't a whole lot that scares me anymore. I've actually lived real life. There ain't a ghost on this planet that could scare me more than people in the real world. You know what I'm talking about? But it was creepy. She owned it. She owned it. And she had a great time. And it was so cool. It was so cool. Also, so you're going to Springfield, right? You're going on our trip with us. You can go to Wilson's Creek and you can explore this really significant Trans-Mississippi battlefield. It's a really cool place. Even if you're not into history, they got a lot of cool stuff, a lot of archaeological stuff off of the site, a lot of guns, a lot of cannons, a lot of cool stuff. Then you can go to the Pythian Castle and do a little history ghost tour, which was really, really cool. An extremely cool building. You want to talk about picturesque? Be looking on Instagram over the next few days. It ain't happening tonight. I'm going to try to edit this show tonight and be done with it because I have archaeology coming up and a lot of homework. But I will try to get the pictures out over the next few days. So check back to my Instagram for pictures. The castle's awesome looking. I will get those out there. But then also you can go to Fantastic Caverns if you like. You just heard about it. We didn't go there, but you heard about it. But you should consider staying at the Best Western Railhaven. Okay? Why? Justin, why? Best Western. That's like a big brand name. It is, but it's actually, I'll say this. I've been having to travel a lot in the last couple of years for, say, archaeology and these little things that I get to go and do. They're like the new Motel 6. I've told you guys, I used to be a big proponent of the 6 because back in the day, you could travel across the country for $50 a night and they were clean and most of them were remodeled. That's not true anymore. They're all crack hotels now. Best Western has taken their place and it's going to cost you $100 a night plus. But in that range and with inflation, taking into account all things, they are clean, they're always renovated, and they've been awesome. And ever since I've been a member of their little members club, which doesn't cost you anything, by the way, I've actually gotten a free night for basically every 3 nights I've stayed anywhere. It's a pretty good deal, and you get some really low rates. But anyway, for all of you, travel hack, look into Best Western's rewards program. It's actually pretty legit, and they've all been very clean, remodeled, and safe. But anyway, why do I bring up the Best Western Railhaven in Springfield, Missouri? Well, Springfield, Missouri, as some of you may know, was considered by some the birthplace of Route 66. Even though it was kind of a Tulsa businessman's idea and a guy from Chicago was in on it, Route 66 has a very colorful history, but it runs right through Springfield, Missouri. And the Railhaven Motel that has been administered, I guess, or owned by Best Western since the 60s, is an original hotel from the 1930s, right there on Route 66. Elvis Presley himself stayed there, apparently. And we stayed there last weekend, and it was great. We had a good time. It was clean. It's a good place to stay. The people there were awesome. We got there. We're rewards members or whatever. We got there, and they had goodie bags for us because we were rewards members. We got like some Reese's Cups, a couple of little kitty cats, and a couple of bottles of water. I was like, that's just a nice little touch, isn't it? Anyway, it is a legitimate hotel from Route 66 area. They've even got their neon sign out there still. They've even got their classic Best Western sign still on the property in between some of the buildings. It's super cool. Like it was there from like 65 to 96 or something. It had a little plaque on it. But it's a legitimate Route 66 hotel stay. And Elvis Presley stayed there a couple of times from what I could tell. Just super neat. For any of you out there that are Route 66 people, that was a super cool stay. And it was very clean, very nice. It's a good place to stay. Anyway, I missed one thing in our little adventure, and then I can wrap up this show for tonight. We checked out downtown Springfield has a very cool history museum. It's called the History Museum on the Square. And I pointed out because it is a beautifully done, very well done place. And it turns out that Wild Bill Hickok, you guys heard of him? Old West aficionados. Apparently, well, Springfield claims that the very first Wild West shootout happened right on their square between Wild Bill Hickok and I've already gone blank on the other guy's name, and it doesn't matter that much. But he shot that dude dead in the street, right in the square of Springfield, and they even have the spots marked in their square, and you can go stand on those two spots. Well, the History Museum has a very cool, beautiful museum, 5 floors worth, 4 floors, 5 floors worth of history about Springfield. And it talks about Wilson's Creek, talks about Civil War in Missouri, talks about the Wild West and Wild Bill Hickok. And they have an interactive little exhibit where you can participate in that shootout. And it was super fun. And I dropped that dude like a hot potato. My poor daughter, she was shooting somebody in the 3rd floor of the building behind the guy, but I dropped him like he was hot. Anyway, it was super cool. They have a very cool museum in downtown Springfield, like their square. That's a beautiful place. Very beautiful. Springfield, I've been sleeping on Springfield all my life. We used to go there when I was young to the Bass Pro Shop. Super cool. But you only did that when you went to Branson, Silver Dollar City when you were a kid, right? I've been sleeping on Springfield my whole life. It's a really neat town with a lot of cool stuff going on in it. So something for you guys to consider, especially if you're in Missouri or Kansas or Oklahoma or Arkansas, somewhere in the Quad State region. That's a great way to seize a moment. Go to Springfield. Check out all the cool things they have to offer. We did it, and it was a success. It cost me a small fortune, but I was seizing the moment. And I was going to make sure that child had a good time and set an example, set a precedent for. Now, we can't do this all the time, but this is what it can be like. This is how life can be. This was a short weekend adventure, and we had a blast, and we experienced a bunch of things we'd never experienced, all within 3 hours of home. Like I've told you guys on this show from day one, you have no excuses. You can't say there's nothing to do. If you've got a weekend, if you've just got a day, somewhere within an hour to 3 hours is a day trip, a weekend trip, a long weekend trip. Everywhere I've ever worked, and all my time at Big Purple, I was in cities all over the Midwest, the West Coast, the South. Somewhere close to you, within a 1 to 3 hour drive, is more things than you could do in a year's time of weekends. It's all about knowing what you like, knowing what you're interested in, and having the motivation to get out and live your life. And that's what Wayward Stories is all about, isn't it? Having the motivation to reprioritize and remake your life. Get out and find yourself. And part of finding yourself is going out there and figuring out what you love. And the best way to figure out what you love is to experience life. And the only way to experience life is by getting off your butt and getting behind the steering wheel and heading out on the open road and seeing what is out there to get into. Anyway, this is a great place to wrap up tonight's show. I hope to get it out tonight. I'm going to do my best to do that. You guys, thanks so much for listening, sticking around to the end. I hope that you're all going to go out and seize some moments of your own, just as Hugo has done. Hugo, thank you again, brother. Mary, Rob C., Josh, all of you guys for staying in touch. It is so cool to hear from you guys, and I love everything you guys are out there doing. And that's a little call to action for all of you. Get in touch with me. We'll talk, guys. I want to hear your stories. I want to talk to you. I want to connect with you. Super cool way to live your life, making friends all over the globe. Portugal, Hugo. Super cool. Super cool. I'm psyched about that. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Once again, please like, please rate and review, please subscribe, please share it with your friends. And you guys, thanks again for being so patient over the last few weeks. And I can't promise you that it won't be another 3 or 4 weeks before we see another episode. Got to get this class taken care of first. Got to go do some archaeology. I got a lot of moments to go seize, and I hope you guys do too. Until we meet again, you guys don't forget maybe the single most important thing I could ever tell you. Be good to each other.